So we're going to move right into our final panel of the evening. I'm going to call up a few gentlemen to the stage right now. Mr. David Kale from Wirtz Beverage, Jerry Nelson from Unane, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and BJ Oslin from Pipeworks Brewing. They're here to talk a little bit about what it means to be small and local. You know, I think the phrase small and local gets tossed around a lot in craft beer these days, and you know, I think for many years, upstart craft brewers have leaned on these two messages as sort of their key differentiators from the larger, more resource competitors, and they've won, you know, the attention of new drinkers along the way. But a flood of new craft category entrants in the last 24 months has really forced companies that once relied on this small and local badge as a primary customer acquisition strategy to not only rethink the true meaning of each of those concepts, but also to more clearly define their long-term goals, their go-to-market strategies, and their distribution plans. So with thousands of craft brewers now all claiming to be small and local, the question really becomes, how do brewers capture the attention and I guess the loyalty of these drinkers while balancing the urge to grow rapidly and expand into many non-local markets? So I'll call up these guys up here right now to share their thoughts on small and local. And hopefully throughout this panel discussion, we'll be able to you know, really address the different business models that exist out there. You know, we have David, obviously, who's a distributor who can add a global perspective on things from many of the brands that he talks to from across the country. So come on up, sit down, join me up here, and a big round of applause for these guys. All right, guys, we got the bright lights.
Yeah.
We all got beers?
We do.
Yes.
I got a beer.
Perfect.
Yes, I do.
So,
Is this thing on?
got about a half an hour to discuss sort of what small and local means. And I know everyone back there, you know, might be hitting the bar, grabbing another beverage, hopefully coming back to their seats. I just kindly ask that everybody give these guys the attention they deserve. You know, this is our feature discussion of the evening, and I'm really excited to have you guys here. So, you know, I'll kind of start with the brewers. By the way, this is David from Wirtz, BJ from Pipeworks, and Jerry from Unane, just so everybody knows.
Thank you. Don't throw anything at us.
So I want to start with the brewers up here. You know, just talk a little bit about your brand so everyone is a little bit familiar with who you guys are, you know, how big you guys are, how sales are going. Put this small and local for Pipeworks and Unane into perspective for everyone. We'll start with BJ.
Sure. So we're a Pipeworks Brewing Company. We started just over 3 years ago in the city of Chicago. We were one of the famous or infamous Kickstarter breweries. In our first year, we produced about 400 barrels of beer. 2 years later, last year, we produced just under 2,000 barrels. This year, we're projecting about a 6,000 barrel output. Yeah, so yeah, that's Pipeworks. That's our scale. What else?
Awesome. Well, I guess talk a little bit about your beers and you know, just what they represent and what you guys are kind of going after from a brand perspective.
Okay, sure. So I mean, Pipeworks is kind of a unique brand, I'd say. We're a very experimental brand. In the 3 years that we've been in business, we've done about 150 different brands. And so for us, I mean, being small and local gave us that leverage, that ability to make a bunch of different beers, to experiment and really flex our creative muscle, rather than relying on, I think, the flagship model up until now. So, you know, we try to be creative, approach things from a culinary perspective, keep things new and interesting.
And Jerry, how about Unane? What are you guys all about?
So right now we have done about, so we've launched about just about a year and a half after Pipeworks, and we're in about 2 years in the market, and we've done about, right now we're doing about 1,000 barrels apiece.
Wow. So, you know, very small, both of you guys, in comparison to where we're sitting today here at Revolution. Talk a little bit about your experience being that small and having to go out there and either compete or at least exist alongside some brands like Revolution, like Lagunitas now, and some of the larger competitors out there.
Sure. I think for us, being small was awesome because when we started our company, there was 3 of us, and we're one of the few self-distributing breweries in the city. And what that meant for us was that we had our hands in every part of operations. So that meant we were coming up with recipes, we were brewing the beer, we were salesmen, we were distributors, we were doing the artwork on the bottles, we were doing the PR, the advertising. And I think that going about it in that way for us kept us really close to the community of drinkers that we were dealing with, and it made us really responsive. If we made a beer, for example, that might have been not quite what drinkers were looking for, it gave us this responsiveness that I think maybe larger breweries don't have. If you made a couple thousand barrels of a beer, and then you're putting that out to market. We were putting out 7 barrels of a beer at a time. And so the next time we were able to brew that beer, we were responsive to what raters were saying or what other people were saying about our beer. So I think it gave us a great knowledge about every aspect. And as we grow and maybe start giving up some of these things in our brewery to perhaps in the future a distributor or something, we know so many parts about that as we've gone along. So it gives us a lot of power, I think, and it's really exciting for us to have been able to work in every aspect of the beer industry as a brewer.
Right, and Jerry, you've had a pretty similar experience in the sense that sort of like a 1.5-man operation over there, kind of doing almost everything yourself and 1 part-time staffer, I think.
Well, I do pretty much everything myself. I don't have any full-time employees. I have one guy who kind of comes and helps me on my brewing days or bottling days, and that's it right now. But right now, I don't, as far as the market in general, as far as outside brands that are local, Lagunitas or other outside brands, I don't really think of them all that much as a small and local brand. I really have to focus on what I'm doing and really focus on making sure that beer is how I want it to be.
Right. Now Dave, you represent Jerry's brand, obviously. What was it about the product or the liquid that really attracted you to Unane, or was it something about the brand? What was it that made you want to represent such a very small brand that is really doing something quite different than a lot of other brewers out there?
We figured we want to. That was early on in building our portfolio, and we want to have a good variety and range of products in the book. And Jerry was doing something completely different from anyone else at the time. He was making all saisons and variations of saisons, and that was an attractive concept. I love the idea of a 1.5-person operation, getting their hands in there, and I mean his system is a cobbled together, crazy, alchemist sort of brewery, and it's kind of fun to see somebody do that and make it come to fruition. But I think it was based on the styles basically.
I feel like leading into your point about beer can be made on any level of brewing systems. You don't need an expensive $100,000 brewing system to make great beer. So they realized that, and they took a chance on me and really kind of embraced what I was thinking about.
Right. What sorts of value does a very small brand like that bring in an organization like yours, like Wurtz, that is, it sort of has its roots in wine and spirits, very large and well-resourced there, but getting more involved in the craft segment?
First of all, when you call yourself a small brewery, I don't think anybody's goal when they start as a brewery is to just be a small brewery for forever. This is a business. Everybody wants to be successful, and of course small is all relative, right? In fact, I guess to back up and talk about what small is, I think we use that term because of trying to differentiate craft beer from macro beer. Of course, breweries of this scale may be separating themselves from Lagunitas and Sam Adams and that sort of thing, and that's fair as well. You know, it's good to have artisanal products. It's good to have something that covers a lot of bases, and Jerry's operation is unlike anything we've come across locally or in many markets, and it's, you know, it's pretty tough to pull off these days. So,
right. So I do just want to make a quick, just a reminder to the folks at the bar. Hey, guys at the bar, everyone, we got a panel going on up here. So I know the folks that are still sitting in their seats really want to hear what these guys are saying. There's beers on tap all night long. Revolution has opened the taps for you guys, so just give me another 20 minutes up here to pepper these guys with questions, and I promise you guys can drink and network all night long.
We're way more interesting than your friend.
And handsome, too.
He's not including me in that, I think. So, you know, getting back to sort of what you're talking about, small and local, what I want to kind of go down the line, you know, what is small and local? What do those words mean to you guys? How do you guys define that? Because right now it feels like it means so many different things to so many different people.
Local is an easy one. I think everybody uses local as a branding or marketing term because there's a perception of freshness and quality with that. Obviously, I say perception because just because it's local doesn't mean it's fresh on the shelf. But certainly, if you have a tap room, you know, that's access to fresh beer. Small, I think, is a tougher thing to discuss, and I think it's less relevant. Like I said, I don't think anybody's their business plan is to stay very small and barely make enough money to survive. This is a business, and everybody wants to grow. But we also want to separate ourselves, craft breweries, from macro breweries. So it's more relevant for me selling beer to maybe on an account level, where you know, you've got buyers in an account, certainly an on-premise, who are you know, bombarded with people coming in every day, talking to you guys, you know, 100 different breweries, and you need to find a way to edit, and you need a way to pare down your beer list. So whether it's saying we only want American craft, or we only want Belgian beers, or maybe we just want local, small can be a component in that, and certainly differentiating yourself from, you know, some of the breweries, maybe a Lagunitas or Allagash they make great beers, but they are in a lot of venues. So if you have a very craft-centric bar and the sports bar next door has Lagunitas IPA and Allagash White, maybe you don't want to have those products in your place. Maybe you'll have different ones from those breweries, but that's where the small, large thing becomes an issue. Otherwise, I don't think that the small, large thing is as important as local. Everybody wants to talk about local, whether they're Lagunitas or whether they're Unane.
Right. So, you know, obviously small seems to be, you know, a big differentiator, but, you know, for you guys on the production side, you know, what does it mean for the beer itself? And I guess in terms of selling that beer, you know, does small sell, and can small outsell large?
Well, I mean, by sheer volume, clearly we can't outsell. Whether or not we can compete on the shelf, I think definitely. I don't think size is so much important when you're on a shelf as the quality and word of mouth of the product that's in the bottle. I think beer drinkers and beer geeks, they're not stupid. All the marketing in the world is not going to usurp the kind of like the quality of the beer. So if you make good beer, that's going to be the most important thing. and that's going to take you from being a small brewer to a larger brewer. I mean, I think small to me is a starting point, and whether or not that means that your goal is to become a nationwide brand, or if that just means that you want to grow and meet demand of the community that you live within, small is a starting point, and whether or not the relative largeness that you want to get to, it doesn't really matter, you know. I mean, as long as you're making a quality product, and I think also serving the people that want to drink your product, you know. I mean, you want to meet demand, and so if you're not meeting demand, I think then, you know, you're smaller than you need to be.
Right. So, Jerry, I mean, small probably means something different to you than it does for BJ, you know, at this present moment in time.
Well, you know, small is always relative. You know, small compared to Pipeworks for Unane is we're almost identical size-wise. However, if you were to compare Unane to like a small-town brewery in like Idaho or I don't know some other small local community who started up at the same time, they're going to only do a small amount of beer, you know, comparatively. So small is relative.
Right.
I can't, you know, yeah, we're small compared to Lagunitas, yes.
So when you start from this point of being, you know, incredibly small as you are, how do you think about your future growth and kind of where you want to be ultimately as a brand down the road? And how does that fit with your idea of what small and local is?
Well, every brand has its own like kind of entity, like their own direction. Unane is not going to be what Revolution is right now. We're not going to make as much beer as they are right now. We're not going to do as much cans as they are. So I have to realize what my brand is specifically, and really try to hone into what my brand can be specifically.
Right.
So it's a really hard question because I have to like split out. Revolution does you know 80 barrels in cans mostly. Unane can only do so many in 750 milliliter bottles. So
right. So do you have a goal in mind of where you want to get to?
Oh, it's an extremely hard question because it's comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
You know, everything is comparative. Yeah, I can only do what I think what's good for my brand, and do things that really work well with what I'm planning to do, both as far as what the brand is, what we are positioning our brand as an image, and as what we think in terms of what it will grow to be.
Right. So, BJ, I mean, for you guys at a very similar point, I guess, in terms of production, you know, relatively speaking to Unane, but you're kind of in that middle ground now, taking that next step,
Right.
and building a new facility. And,
Yeah.
I don't know, you know, how much you guys are growing in terms of, you know, a multiplier, but
Right.
you know, certainly, you know, departing from where you guys are in a very big way,
Yeah.
relatively speaking. How did you guys work through that process and ultimately decide this is right for our brand, this is where we want to go?
Sure. I think for us, I mean, it was like an organic choice. Our current facility is at capacity and has been for about a year. I mean, we literally can't fit another tank in the building. So, I mean, at that point, it is clearly time to either like accept where you are in the market and just like continue to feed that. But I mean, if you have more retailers asking for your product, who am I to tell them no? So, I mean, like for us, it was a very like organic decision. It was like more people want our beer. We clearly want to grow as long as it's organic, and we're not pushing ourselves into the market when it's not wanted. So for us, it was just the natural decision. In our first facility, we started with 3 7-barrel tanks. Now we're up to 12 fermenters and 6 bright tanks, and that maxed out the small floor space that we had. So it was time to make that next decision and build a bigger facility, which for us also means a bit of a shift in, I think, our philosophy of brewing as well. Up until now, we focused on primarily strong, higher alcohol, high gravity beers in the bomber format. And something that we've always wanted to do, and something that we're really excited to be able to do in the new facility, is to start offering more session strength beers. Beers that you can actually drink every day. A couple of beers, after a night, or during the night. Up until now, you drink one 13% barrel-aged imperial stout. That's your week right there. Right. So we're really excited, to have a format shift as well. I mean, it's allowing us to expand and move into cans, which is something that I think for a lot of craft brewers, that's something that you're looking forward to, is the day when you can actually move into the canned package.
So, I mean, this is going to radically change how you guys operate as a business.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you're changing your business model almost entirely. You're letting the market dictate that for sure. But as you guys are thinking about this, from the perspective of business owners, what are sort of the thoughts that go into this process?
I think, we kind of did the opposite of any other brewery. I mean, Pipeworks Story is kind of like the, black sheep. I remember going to my first Brewers Guild meeting long before Pipeworks was even funded, and, kind of talking with guild members, established brewery owners, and being like, oh, we're going to do this thing, or we're going to do, different beers all the time, and bombers, and we're going to make only, 500 barrels of beer a year, and everyone just, scoffed at us. They were like, you fools, what are you doing? And so, they're like, you have to start with a strong draft presence. You have to start with a flagship beer, blah, blah, blah. And we've done everything the absolute opposite of the standard business model. We've done only specialty releases up until now and let the market dictate what the flagship beer was going to be. And now over time, we've slowly introduced ourselves as a draft presence. So, our business models, we're kind of navigating new waters in a lot of ways. We're kind of creating our own story as we go. But so far it's worked, and I think we're just trusting our instincts in a lot of ways, being cautious and not trying to get too big for our britches, and just paying attention. I think it's really important to see what the industry's doing, listen to your peers, at least when they're telling you you're silly, but listen to them when they have good advice for you, and follow in their footsteps, like great people like Revolution or Lagunitas or Half Acres.
So, would you say that Pipeworks was, from a business model perspective, a bit disruptive in the early days? And I guess how are you keeping that spirit alive as you move into a,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess we were disruptive. And I think that in some ways we became a model that a lot of people have emulated over time. And how are we going to keep that spirit alive? It's who we are. And that's never going to change. I think that, you look at a Facebook post from us and it's goofy and it's crazy and it's all of us dancing around the brewery like a bunch of idiots. That's who we are, there's no PR department being like, hey, this will really connect with beer geeks and craft brew dudes. No, that's who we are. We're a bunch of goofballs that run a brewery. Just like many people in this industry, we're young guys that are following our dream. And so I think that by being real and being who we are, that's going to keep us humble as we go and allow us not to get ahead of ourselves. And I think that's really important in this industry, is to be humble, and as you grow, to pay attention to what's happening, because you don't want to lose the spirit of your brewery. We all got into this because we love beer and we love the craft of it. And as you grow, you're going to lose parts of that business because it's going to get too big. We're not 3 guys anymore. We're approaching 20 people in our family. And I do describe our business as a family. But now you have to start, giving parts of that to other people and letting them take the reins. And that might mean at other times, letting distributors start, working with your product, which is something that, that's a scary thing. We've been able to go to every single account that sells our beer, and we have FaceTime with them, and we can see the products on the shelves, and we know if a beer's not selling, and we can follow Rate Beer or Beer Advocate and have that finger on the pulse. And so that'll change over time and get a little bit more sketchy, but I think as long as we stay true to ourselves, we're going to keep that small mentality, even as we grow larger and maybe get out of state. I think by being who we are, it's going to help a lot.
So more of a state of mind. Dave, as someone who's, I guess, on the outside looking in, Pipeworks being self-distributed, what's your sort of impression of not only the business model and the way that they approach the market, but kind of their development and their progress?
I love it when small, or new founded breweries self-distribute. I encourage it. I mean, it's a great way to have more income come in. But I think, as BJ was pointing out, it's a great way to meet accounts. It's a great way to be out there talking to people and building up those relationships, because the relationships are critical. BJ and I were talking earlier about this, but I remember early on, for these guys, people going, "Ah, man, a Kickstarter brewery," and really, I just love the fact that they proved everybody wrong. I think it's just brilliant. So many new breweries have followed suit with what these guys have done. Maybe they're not all winning Rate Beer, Brewery of the World awards and all that, but they're doing the same thing with large format bottles, coming out with new releases, limited releases all the time. These guys have a system now where there's so much of a following that everybody wants to try the new thing they put out. So they can almost, I don't know what your sales are, but I mean, I would imagine you could sell through most of your product pretty quickly, because no one wants to miss out on something. No consumer wants to go, "Oh, my buddy tried that latest Pipeworks beer and it was the best one ever and I missed it." So they all go out and want to buy it. So it's a, I don't know if any of it was by design, but it worked out perfectly. I think it's a pretty cool thing.
Right. So you have the opportunity now to kind of witness how Pipeworks and BJ, how they go to market, and you get to see them sort of from afar. You get to work firsthand with a brand like Unane. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, how do each of these companies embody what it means to be small and local, even though they're doing it in different ways?
Oh man, that's really tough. I mean, and they all, they all are so different. We also represent another small local brewery called Buckle Down, which is just outside of the city limits in Lyons. And they have a different model, which is another one that we tend to encourage with new startup breweries, is have a tap room. Make sure you've got some direct access to the public. Neither of these guys started with tap rooms, but it's worked out for them. But Buckle Down has a really loyal following that comes to the brewery. They sell a lot of growlers. Again, you're similar to self-distribution. You're making a lot more money selling directly to the customers and selling growlers. So, and then of course you've got people coming in, getting the tour, feeling connected to the brewery, buying merchandise. So they're paying you to wear your brewery's logo around and advertise for you. All these things add up to some success. So, but they all do it differently. I would encourage them all to self-distribute and to have a tap room in the beginning.
So Jerry, hearing BJ's story and hearing how David, sort of perceives both of you guys, what are you thinking in terms of where you guys are headed, and how are you thinking about where Unane might end up?
Well, I would love to be having a tap room. And self-distribute.
Like a lemonade stand.
However, that's not going to happen.
It'll happen, Jerry.
No.
From a brand perspective, do you think Unane is one that consumers would be receptive to in other markets outside of Chicago?
No, I'm definitely, right now we are distributed in 3 states: Illinois, all of us with Wirtz, Illinois; in Wisconsin with Wirtz, Wisconsin; and Michigan with Fox distribution. So we're looking at other markets, but I'm not really, focused on going farther right now. But I think we have a really solid base as far as like what we need to do to get the beer to market.
So I got a question here for David that I've been burning to sort of ask. Well, I got two questions actually. So you guys obviously represent some out-of-state breweries as well. Some of them have grown quite large. I'm sure in their local markets, the small and local idea plays quite well, but here in Chicago, it's a much different pitch. So, how should an out-of-state brewery, one that might rely on that small and local messaging back home, think about expanding outside of its home market, and what strategies have worked well for your brands here in Chicago?
Again, I guess that goes back to scale. Certainly, local by definition doesn't travel well. But I guess you could attach yourself in some local fashion by doing collaborations with local breweries. Certainly, some of the bigger breweries like Sierra and New Belgium, Deschutes just announced today they're really looking at North Carolina as well for another brewery. So opening other brew houses can obviously make you local in those markets. We've seen breweries recently like Oscar Blues buying Perrin from Michigan. It's not Oscar Blues, but it's their way of having a local brewery in that market. Right. So those are ways you could, I guess, bring the local component with you or branch out into it. Otherwise, it's tougher. We've seen larger breweries come into markets and get involved with the community a lot, giving back, donating to certain charities, trying to be involved in the beer community more, which is always important.
So really entrenching yourself as much as possible in the local environment as you can. So
people might not think of you as being from out of town. And obviously these are all breweries that make phenomenal beer. So if you make great beer, that's gonna rule over anything. And hopefully you sell through product fast enough that it stays really fresh.
I totally agree. I think the idea of a small and local is going away a little bit, especially in the Chicago market. People think of, obviously people think of Unane and Pipeworks as local. What's small in comparison? We actually are small, but compared to Lagunitas or something, or we are small, but we could be quite big. I think the idea is small, and I know some other breweries that are even smaller than I am, opening up that could be marginalized by the idea of small and local by that in that respect.
So really not restricting yourself as a brand to being just those things in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all relative. The small could be think of as 1,000 barrels, or it can be thought of as 500 barrels or 2,000 barrels.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that I think none of us want to be the beer that people drink because we're the small local beer. We want to be the beer that people drink because we make the best beer that people can drink.
I think that's my main point, I guess.
Jerry's translator here.
So we want to be the pint that you ask for, not because you're like, oh, I'm helping the little guy out.
Yeah,
no, we want to be the best tasting beer you could put in your hand.
If it happens to be small and local, that's more of a benefit.
Yeah, because honestly, all right, we're going to see this more and more now. Like, everyone's opening a brewery. And this is great. It's great that people are like being entrepreneurial and we're all trying to follow our dreams. But the fact is that you have a lot of people starting in this industry that don't necessarily have the skill set. They're coming from like a homebrew background, as I did myself. But I mean, not everyone's going to win, and there's going to be bad pints of beer out there. And I don't think that we can sit here and be like, hey, this is a small local beer, and I'm going to buy it to support this guy, even though I'm not enjoying the drink that I'm having. Like, I'm always going to go to Lagunitas or Sierra Nevada if that's the beer that tastes the best. So I think that we, as small local brewers, need to strive to make the best possible beer that we can make, because it's not going to be enough just to be small and local, because now there's 50 small and local brewers, and someone's going to be a lot better.
Sometimes it takes two brains to make a good point, yeah.
But I mean,
this is exactly what I was talking about.
But we have to strive to be better brewers. We have to be cleaner. We have to be stronger. We have to be better than the big guys, because I mean, they have technology, they have science, they have laboratories, they have every affordable thing to help them make the best pint possible. Right. Whereas when I started my brewery, I had a little homebrew kettle, literally, that I brewed 4 times on to fill a 7-barrel fermenter. And if that first beer came out and people were like, it's okay, but they're small and local, like, I mean, Pipeworks wouldn't be where they are today. Like, I mean, you have to make the best beer that you can possibly make.
So, yeah, round of applause for that.
Here's to good beer.
And
cheers, guys.
Good beer wins.
If I had a hand free, I'd give you a round of applause as well, because that's a perfect segue to my final question here. So thank you. I think it is sort of a commonly held belief. You touched on all the people entering the category right now, which we've been talking a little bit about tonight. But there is this commonly held belief that competition in business is good, that it's good for business. And certainly, I think competition can help many companies innovate and improve in order to remain relevant to their consumer base. But unless new competitors are actually, I guess, making vertical progress as opposed to horizontal progress, right, adding something new to a space versus copying what's already been done, competition, really isn't doing much. It's only making it more difficult for the brands that exist to turn a profit. So right now in craft, sometimes it appears that we're heading towards just that, where there's a lot of people looking to enter the space, and not many of them are adding anything terribly new and exciting. They're just sort of copying what's existing. So I guess my question, in a long-winded way is, do you agree? And if so, what are the potential ramifications of this?
Wow, that's huge.
That is huge. I could paint a rosy picture and say something like, there are 12 notes on a piano, but there are millions of songs out there.
And a lot of them sound the same.
Of course, a lot of them sound the same, and then a lot of them sound like the Beatles or Nirvana or something too. So there's some replication that ends up being successful.
Well, you have both national or local. Yeah, I mean, you could look at any brand coming into the Chicago market in that respect, and then you can just look at the beer market in general in that respect. So, I mean,
I think if breweries come in to the business with the right expectations, then it can be successful. It's been a common phrase thrown around that you don't get into this business to be a millionaire. Sure, Nick Floyd flies in first class. I've seen it a few times. But we all, not many breweries can be 3 Floyds either. But if you go into it thinking, you know what, I'm starting a small business, of course, not to contradict what I said earlier about, we don't get into this business to not to grow, but you get into it to start a small business and be successful enough to support your family, doing something you really like, being happy to get out of bed in the morning and go to work. That should be enough, and if that's your goal, then you'll probably do great. if your goal is to be Three Floyds or Revolution, then you know, to quote Rob Halford, you got another thing coming, right?
Get ready to be humbled.
Yeah.
I think for me, like I think it's really exciting to see all these new breweries open. It's also a little scary. I'm not scared for my business. I think that Pipeworks has secured a firm fan base, and I think we're growing organically. And I'm not going to say I'm not worried, but you know, like we're doing things in a way that we feel safe with. I'm a little more scared that people might be giving up a lot to break into this business, and the craft beer bubble's not going to burst, but the like little tiny like I'm going to give it my dream is going to burst, and breweries are going to shut down. Unless, you know, like, I mean, unless they really like work hard to like make a quality product. And that at times is going to mean different things. For example, you know, with Pipeworks expansion, I have stepped down as brewmaster of Pipeworks because I know that at the scale that we're moving towards, that I am no longer the best candidate for that job. And I'm not going to be so overly prideful that I'm going to sit here and be like, no, I'm going to be the brewmaster and I'm going to do everything and it's going to be me, me, me. It's like, no, now it's time to hand the reins over to someone that's qualified to make those transitions. And I think that unless breweries are willing to be flexible and as they move through their journey, you know, I mean, there's going to be failures. We've seen it before. I think historically, like
being mature.
Well, being mature and realistic. I think being realistic is something that some people aren't being.
Realistic's a great point.
And what did you say earlier, Jerry? Be humble?
Humble, realistic. Yeah.
Humble, realistic, and mature. There you have it, folks. The keys to success, all here at Brew Talk. Well, I just wanted to, you know, thank all of our speakers for joining us today, especially these three guys up here. Clearly, there's this big sign right here that I have to mention. We truly wouldn't be able to do it without all our sponsors. These are the folks, I mean, I'm sure you see all the gear and the sound equipment and the TVs. I mean, we wouldn't be able to send this stuff around the country, and our entire staff that's here tonight helping put this event on if it weren't for our sponsors. They really are, you know, some of the folks that make it happen. So OI, PackTech, Pubkeg, Vicinity Brew, and Inner Workings, thank you. Otherwise, we truly wouldn't be here. I'll make one final pitch for the evening. We're coming back in June for our full-day conference on June 11th. The Brewbound session will be here, so hopefully we see some of you guys there. And if there's any new brands or new breweries in the audience tonight, those that are less than 2 years old, we also have what we call our Startup Brewery Challenge, where you can pitch your brand on stage at the Brewbound session and, you know, basically earn a chance to fly out to Portland, Oregon, partner up with the folks at Craft Brew Alliance, brew a batch of beer that's sent all around the country, learn from their departments. It's a pretty neat program that we've put together. So hopefully some of you folks will be there in June, and let's get a beer. Cheers.
Woo! Go Blackhawks.